But welcome to the National PID Strategies Interest Group session. We've called this Into the Future because we're looking at focus areas for 2025 and beyond. There are some collaborative notes we'll put the link into the chat quite often as people join. So please add your names if you want to add your name. If you're not already a member of the group, we'll make sure you get updated on any outputs from this session. So, as I said, we're the National PID Strategies Interest Group. We are, and this is the session in, what are we, breakout, I don't think it matters which breakout we are, breakout 6. If you don't want to hear about National PID Strategies, you're probably in the wrong session. So, I'll get to move next one. So, particularly welcome to new RDA members. You might have seen this one already. Because welcome to existing members and new members, people who are member of the group or aren't member of the group. Welcome. Obviously, there's the 6 guiding principles at the heart of the RDA community. I'm not going to go through them because you can read them and you've probably seen them before. But everyone's welcome here. This is the agenda today. So I'm just going to do the introduction and a bit of an update on activities of the interest group. We've got Hannah giving feedback on the survey results. We have a new case studies template, which Natasha's going to go through and look at some of how the working group outputs have helped people in their strategies. If you're confused about the working group and the interest group, I'm going to go through that in a minute, so don't worry. And then we have a selection of case studies. So from Ireland, France, Finland, and Australia. I should apologise to North and South America people with the time zone. We had to pick a particular time zone, so it's not particularly friendly if you're in the Americas. So apologies to those people who hopefully you'll be watching this on the recording. And then after the presentations, we'll look at focus areas for the rest of the year, and then we have plenty of time for discussion and questions and answers. So if you do have any questions, please put those in the chat. Please use the chat. And we also have the collaborative notes documents. There are links to this set of slides in there. And I've got links to a couple of the sets of slides. I'll put the other sets of slide links in after the session or during. So yes, so again, welcome. So if you are new and you don't know what an interest group is, they serve as an ongoing platform communication, discussion, coordination among individuals outside and within RDA with a shared interest. We are now the National PID Strategies Interest Group. We were a working group before which had an 18-month time period, and I'll go through the outputs in a second. But this interest group that we are now, we have 4 co-chairs, 3 of us, Natasha, Chris, well, that's me, and Hannah, and are here to present. John, not from being a terrible time zone, he's on paternity leave, so couldn't make it. So our main purpose is to facilitate the information exchange between those developing or delivering national PID strategies to improve coordination and alignment and to streamline efforts between countries through the RDA. Now, like I said, we were a working group and we transitioned into an interest group because interest groups can just carry on, and there was lots of things we still wanted to do when the working group had ended. So what we achieved through the working group was we had a national PID strategy guide and a checklist, which were to facilitate uptake and alignment. You might have heard about the RDA Tiger project yesterday. There was a session and a presentation in the opening plenary. They helped to produce some user-friendly versions, which was a white paper based on the guide and a much more graphical user checklist. And the links I put in the collaborative notes if you want to access those. The outputs have been used by national PID strategies. I know they've inputted into other strategies like the US. And we had 9 case studies. We did put out an open call. So those are the ones who submitted case studies. We didn't select those. We just, those are the ones we collected, and we are hoping to collect more of those. So we do have clear goals within this interest group, because like I said, we wanted to continue. There's more work to be done because one thing, the strategies change once they've been written. These things are sort of a moving target. They're still going, but we wanted to continue to facilitate that information exchange between different countries developing or delivering national PID strategies. And that may be an approach, may not be a full strategy. People at different stage of that roadmap or that life cycle for developing a strategy. So it doesn't really matter where you are on that journey. We're interested in hearing and collaborating and discussing where you are and finding out about what's going on in that country, or maybe even a region. It doesn't have to be specifically a country. So we also want to facilitate engagement between developers of national PID strategies and international PID providers, such as ORCID, DataCite, and Crossref. We're looking at developing collaboratively the value proposition for those strategies, as well as those component parts that can be reused and adapted by the community. As I mentioned, we want to collect case studies from across the globe. We have the 9, and that leads to the next one about maintenance, the guide, the checklist, but also those case studies do need to be updated from various countries, but we do want to hear from other countries across the globe. So just as a quick update on the interest group, what we, like I've already mentioned, the working group materials, the guide, the checklist, the case studies have been used by national PID strategies. So that's good to see them used internationally, and it also shows the benefits of the RDA and this working group, which is now an interest group. We ran a session about equity challenges for national PID strategies at the virtual plenary 22. That was very interesting because different countries do have different challenges in that area, depending of which region you are in the world. So if you haven't seen that, I'd look back at that because there were some very interesting presentations from South America, India, well, basically all over. We do have 80 members in the group, so I think that's worth shouting about. That's quite good. We're looking to increase that. And this leads now into what we will be talking about in this session, because we have put out a member survey. So Hannah's going to go through the results. Based on feedback and discussion, we've revised the case studies template, and that was circulated for input. So Natasha will go through those changes. And hopefully from the discussion we're going to have later, we will get input from you, the members, or if you're not a member, please join, to shape the future activities of the interest group, because we are 4 co-chairs, but this is a group that's sort of run by the members, and what we do is shaped by you. So that's it from me for now. I'll check the chat if there's any questions, and otherwise I'm going to hand over to Hannah to go through the survey results.
Thank you very much, Chris. So earlier this year, we shared a survey with the members of this interest group with a couple of goals in mind. We wanted to learn whether the members have used in their work the outputs of the working group. We wanted to learn about where they are, where they were, or where you were in your national PID strategy roadmap. And we wanted to hear about your preferences on, what would you like this group to produce as results, as outputs. We did not get many responses, but nevertheless, we did get some interesting feedback. We got 8 responses, 3 from Germany, Finland, Australia, Canada, and USA. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So these were the survey questions. Basically, we asked what was the motivation of people being members of the National PID Strategies Interest Group. What do you guys expect to learn? What is the value that the membership provides to you? What specific outputs could the interest group deliver? Whether the country of the respondents are developing or is developing a national PID strategy, and if yes, who is driving the development. Of course, we had to ask, whether the country is willing to contribute a case study or an update of a case study, and whether you guys used the outputs of the working group. Yeah, we asked for some additional context if that was the case. Next slide, please. Yeah, so 7 responses out of 8 were from members of this group from institutions who are directly involved in the creation of a national PID strategy locally, or in case of Germany, PID roadmap and recommendations. So yeah, I mean, as expected, they were responses from people kind of more involved with the topic of the interest group. When it comes to the use of outputs of the working group, yeah, of course, once again, as expected, they use the outputs. They specifically mentioned that they would definitely like an updated versions of the outputs. In one case, the outputs were used to identify not specifically for a creation of national PID strategy, but to gather expectations for repositories when it comes to persistent identifiers. Next slide, please. Thanks. Yeah, so once again, the main motivation, of the members of this interest group is basically their involvement in their local national PID strategy or roadmap. What they want, what you want, because I know that some of you who responded to the survey are here with us, is some kind of collaboration for creating or maintaining their national PID strategies or and sharing good practices, and to connect with other national stakeholders to exchange perspectives, what they will expect to learn, more about what is happening in other countries, specifically how other countries are interacting with government funding bodies, research organizations, and other stakeholders to kind of talk to them about persistent identifiers. They want to learn from best practice from other countries and apply them on their national level, and they want to learn about the current state of other national strategies and the recommendations coming out of those. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is kind of the questions or the responses to it that were really helpful and really interesting. So what specific outputs could the interest group develop? So I'm just going to read through them, and hopefully this is going to spark some conversation later on when we have a discussion about the IG goals. So here are the responses: collaboration on strategy groups, showcases of derivative efforts, and endorsements of underlying principles of persistent identifiers, framework and use cases on how countries are implementing different persistent identifiers, and if a national PID strategy is actually helping them to do it. User stories, which are easy to understand and relate to, perhaps a list of good example PID policies or strategies, update on national strategy work, published strategies or policies and PID assessment tools, workshops bringing together people involved in national PID strategy work in different countries. And next slide, please. Maybe practical guide for cost-benefit analysis and how to do that. Exchange and information on PID strategies, policies, and similar from other organizations, countries or organizations, sorry. development of a template for national PID strategies, and overview of many different types of persistent identifiers, entities that they are intended to identify. And yeah, the idea was to basically save everyone's work and create this one time instead of having each country do that on their own. And I think this is it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so now over to Natasha. Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah. So first of all, apologies for the bad video connection. I live in Brisbane, where I hope to see many of you later in the year for International Data Week, which will be here in October. But I'm traveling at the moment for work, so I'm in Sydney, and hotel room has just terrible connection and lighting, so apologize for that. So building from what Hannah has said, we have looked at the case study template. That is, the co-chairs met and looked at the case study template ahead of a new round of collecting new and updated case studies that people have provided feedback to us that these case studies are useful to them. They want to know what's happening with national PID strategies in other countries and be able to see from those countries what has worked and what hasn't, and be able to align internationally with other national PID strategies. So the case study template that we have currently, we used that back in, we developed it, I think it was 2022, Chris. 2022 and 23, we collected case studies using that template. And so that's quite a while ago in national PID strategy land, because as Chris mentioned in his introduction, these entities do emerge over time and things change. So a case study is a national PID strategy, whether it's emerging as in we're thinking about the national PID strategy. These are some ideas we have, right through to an established PID strategy from a particular country, or it can be a region. So I think in the past we have heard a case study from Latin America as a region, although that could also be split into different countries. So the revised template was emailed to the whole interest group for comment. So I just want to highlight the changes. So we thought it would be useful to put in a self-rated maturity level of your national PID strategy. So we've categorized those into an emerging strategy, an implementing strategy, or an optimizing strategy. And there are different definitions for those within the template. And also we have asked for reflections on how the RDA materials that were produced by the working group might have been used in your PID strategy development, and what you would like to see next. And this is important from an RDA perspective, particularly to see that the work that we're doing here is useful to people and it is used. We've also put in a section on lessons learned, because as co-chairs, we talk about these things, and we have in the broader members group talked about, you know, how I wish I knew when I started my PID strategy what I knew now. So being able to share that and share some of the mistakes we learn by mistakes is also very useful to have in that template. So that is available for your input. I've put the link to the I just made it into a tiny URL because it's a Google Doc, but I also emailed the downloaded copy for those who can't access Google. And once we get your input into that, we'll finalize it and then open case study submissions to anyone who wishes to submit. So just have to stress what Chris said in his introduction. You know, no one's excluded from submitting a case study. It is an open call for anyone to submit a case study. And those case studies we'd like to make publicly available with the permission of the submitters, so that other people can read them and use them. So they're usually uploaded to Zenodo as part of the RDA collection of materials. and that those case studies can then input into a revised version of our guide and checklist. Because again, those were developed back in 2023, and an update would be quite useful. So I think I will leave it there and say, Hannah's already mentioned that the case studies and those materials have been useful for people and have been used in different strategies. So please, could you have a look at that template if you have a moment, and just see if there's any changes that you would like to suggest. So I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Natasha. Okay, now we have a selection of case studies, different stages of development, and some that were in the existing working group case studies. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Michelle. So I'd like to thank all the people volunteering to present today. Just stop sharing. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Michelle, if that's right.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. So I just want to confirm that you can see my slides. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's all good.
Great. So my name is Michelle Doran, and I am Ireland's National Open Research Coordinator. I just want to thank the members of the interest group for inviting me to present on our National Persistent Identifier Strategy and Roadmap this morning. So in the interest of time, I might just get started if that's okay. So the project to deliver this roadmap was initiated in response to Ireland's National Action Plan for Open Research. Launched in November 2022, the action plan inaugurated an ambitious plan to transition Ireland's research system to a fully open research ecosystem. The action plan has three overarching themes and objectives, and they are to establish a culture of open research, achieving 100% open access to research publications, and enabling fair research data and other outputs. Under theme 2, achieving 100% open access to research publications, action 4.4 of the National Action Plan for Open Research highlights the need for national investment in persistent identifier infrastructure. This is key to ensuring consistent monitoring and improving interoperability across the research system. This action includes two core elements, as you can see. So one is to support for the Irish ORCID Consortium to strengthen and expand the adoption of ORCID in line with international best practice. And then the second action there is the development of a national persistent identifier roadmap. To create and implement a national roadmap for the adoption of key identifiers such as ORCIDs, DOIs, RAIDs and RORs. And the aim of this roadmap is to improve national coordination and accelerate the uptake and integration of these identifiers. So just a brief look at who was involved in the development of the Irish National PID strategy. So members of the National Open Research Forum, past and present. So in alphabetical order, those are Daniel Bangert, Aisling Conway, myself, and Lisa Griffith. Members of our National PID Task Force. This is a task force of key stakeholder representatives appointed and chaired by NORF, and they are listed there on the screen. And then More Brains Cooperatives, they are the consultants. I'm sure are very familiar to many of those who are present in this meeting at the moment. So specialising in open research and research infrastructure, who were awarded the contract to conduct the review and analysis. And finally, many members of the Irish research community who participated in the community consultations, activities and events. The project timeline then, so November 2022, as I've already said, we launched our National Action Plan for Open Research. Between February and September of 2023, we developed our tender and went through the procurement process. This is a publicly funded activity, and in Ireland there are specific procurement policies that need to be funded, or I beg your pardon, that need to be adhered to. The tender itself, I should mention, was also developed in consultation with national and international experts in this area, and I might just circle back around to that when it comes to look at maybe the value of the RDA. in developing our national PID strategy. So there were the three primary aims of the strategy, or the procurement itself, was to develop an Irish PID cost-benefit analysis, to draft a national PID strategy and roadmap, and to provide supporting documents to promote the strategy. In September 2023, we completed contracting with Morebrains Cooperative, and that month we also established a national task force. As I said, these are made up of national community experts. November 2023, the project was kicked off for a 9-month delivery during our National Open Research Festival. In May 2024, the cost-benefit analysis was launched, and in October 2024, so a little behind schedule, the strategic plan and roadmap itself was launched during a meeting of our North-funded projects. So the strategy itself then, what is involved? The approach to developing the Irish PID strategy was an inclusive process focusing on thorough stakeholder and community consultations, and all recommendations were evidence-based. So there's a survey there to enable a clear understanding of the current awareness and usage of PIDs in Ireland, as well as to gain insights into how the community views the opportunities and challenges of widespread PID adoption. The cost-benefit analysis, which I'll look at in a bit more detail in a moment. Focus groups to do a deep dive into the survey results with 3 key stakeholder groups. Those are institutions and research performing organisations, research funding and government organisations, and repositories and infrastructure organisations. A strategic SWOT analysis to identify strategies that build on strengths and improve weaknesses. And then a persistent identifier task force and community workshop to validate the outcome of that strategic SWOT analysis. The main project outputs then, as I said, we had a cost-benefit analysis, and the aim of this cost-benefit analysis was to set out the time and consequent financial savings that could be generated by automatically reusing the information associated with PIDs. It details the methodology and processes used to draft the cost-benefit analysis. And it built an argument for a national central support service comprising 3 full-time equivalent staff, so 2 technical and 1 community manager, to accelerate the uptake of PID implementations and adoptions. And I suppose the key takeaway, the key message here is that the net benefits to the Irish research ecosystem over 5 years of implementing the national support service for those PIDs that I mentioned earlier on came to €1.62 million. The DOI for the cost-benefit analysis is there, and I can also pop links to the North webpage that has all of these documents in after I'm done speaking. So we also, of course, produced the recommendations and the roadmap itself. This focused on what needs to happen to embed PIDs in higher education in Ireland. There are 15 recommendations focused on 4 themes, and those are governance and leadership, community, culture change, and technical support. And once again, the DOI is there for anyone who would like to read that output. And finally, just in terms of outputs, we also produced 3 policy briefs aimed at different stakeholders. So I did say that I would return to the value of the RDA, and it's important, I suppose, in terms of the value of the RDA, to point out that Daniel Vanguard, who was the National Open Research Coordinator when the initial documentation for the PID roadmap and strategy was undertaken, was actually a member of the National PID Strategies working group. So the format and development of our strategy has been undeniably influenced by the working group, as it was the interest group now. Also to mention that during the course of developing the tender documents, we consulted with international experts, many of whom are present on this call at the moment. And also then Natasha participated in key events to launch various parts of the strategy as well. So really the value, I suppose, of just this this network itself came to the fore, I think, in the production of our roadmap. I'm conscious of time. I've gone a bit over. If I may just offer some reflections and lessons learned from our experience here in Ireland. The first is to consider the whole project timeline. So as I mentioned, because this is publicly funded work in Ireland, we have to adhere to certain procurement processes in terms of contracting and consultant. And that timeline was almost as long as the timeline that we put in place for the project itself. I might add, though, that the duration of our project at 9 months was perhaps a little too ambitious, and it could certainly have been doubled. The reason for that is that it does place a considerable, I suppose, burden on the research community itself. You need to give them as much notice about their expected inputs into the formation of the strategy as possible. So to mention, I suppose, that the Irish research ecosystem more generally went under some significant changes in terms of the regulatory body and the research funders that were involved in this, and that also led to difficulties in terms of getting their engagement. So just you need to consider what's going on outside of your organisation and nationally as well. And then at the final point there is to consider alternative routes. So we do have a national PID strategy which is being progressed, but are there other kind of micro tasks that can also be happening in parallel to the PID strategy to ensure that if the PID strategy isn't taken up on time, that it can still continue to gain momentum and traction in your community. So please do get in touch if you have any questions. And as I said, I'll pop links into the chat to where you can find all of those documents once I'm done speaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, we're fine for time, so thank you anyway. You're right to answer any questions if anyone has any questions.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't see any hands up, but while we're waiting for anyone to ask a question, I do have a question actually, because you said about buy-in from funding bodies being crucial. I just wanted to ask, because you did a cost-benefit analysis, and we did similar in the UK and Australia have done similar. I just wanted to ask, how important is that cost-benefit analysis in getting that sort of buy-in and showing the benefits, the financial benefits of having a PID strategy?
I think certainly in terms of specific stakeholders, so the funders, but also the policymakers and the decision makers, it's really written in their language, I suppose, which is these are the efficiency gains across the system. For the research community, the value, I suppose, the primary value for them was the savings in terms of time, but of course they translate to financial savings as well. So yeah, in terms of convincing the policymakers and the funders of it, it's important. Yeah, I would say it's a very useful tool to have.
Brilliant. Thank you. And it's interesting about the alternative routes as well, because I mean, that's something that when we're doing the case studies would be interesting to include those other micro tasks as you mentioned.
Yeah.
I can't see any hands up or any questions in the chat, so thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
If any questions occurring to anybody, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Veronique.
Yes, I'll share my screen. Is it okay?
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, so I am Veronique Stoll. I'm in charge of the PID's national strategy in France and deputy director from our national research data platform repository, and also co-chair of our national research data working group. And this group implements our national open science strategy. So please note that our PID strategy is still taking shape. So it's just a brief presentation about where we are right now. So for us, the goal is to modernize how research is managed in France and to better integrate into the global research ecosystem. So it's an initiative led by the French Ministry of Higher Education and Research. And for those less familiar with how research works in France, it's important to know that the system is really complex. It's made up university, major university, national research organizations, and also higher education institutions. And all this body carry out a significant share of the country's scientific research. So our PID strategy is part of broader legislation on open public data and fits within a larger digital transformation of higher education and research. And of course, the goal is to boost efficiency, transparency, and innovation. One of the key motivations behind our strategy is to make life easier for researchers and research institutions by cutting down on administrative burdens and improving how information flows across the system. So our core principle is just tell us once the information, and instead of having to submit the same information several times to a different system or administrative bodies, researchers will only need to provide it once. So clearly, our key challenges include identifying the researchers, the institutions, the publications, the founding sources, and so on. And of course, to ensure the quality and strong interconnection of information across all the research ecosystem. So, the main goals of our strategy is to create a trusted and shared information base across all the institutions. So to adopt the international PIDs, really the PIDs are key elements from our system. And of course, we adopt the international PIDs for the research structures, so like the labs, the researcher, the founding agency, and the research projects, and so on. So we want to improve the data interoperability across all the information system used by university, research organization, and all the actors in the French research ecosystem. So the idea is not to impose a single system, but rather to enable existing systems to talk to each other is more easily using PIDs. So building this shared data ecosystem will help us coordinate governance, of course, of research. Our main preoccupation is, as I said, to reduce the administrative workload by avoiding repeated data entry. So the PIDs help streamline administrative processes for both researchers and research units. We want, of course, to boost the international visibility of French research by ensuring clear and consistent attribution of research outputs and affiliations. So by, of course, the DOI, the role, and so on. And because PIDs allows, of course, a citation of work and make it easier to recognize the author and institution globally. So by making it easier to reuse the data and the source code with the PIDs, we want to support innovation and scientific progress, and of course to promote trust in science. And last point, we want to support strategic management and evaluation, and for the governance of the research institution, PIDs make it easier to track research activities and founding and outputs. And with that, we can map the research capacity and assessment of impact at every level. So from institution to national body and for the labs and researchers too. So To implement our strategy, we adopted participatory working methods. So at the top, a steering committee on identifiers and data circulation. And this committee has been set up just in January last year, so 2024. And the committee is operating at a political level, and is responsible for developing the strategy and the roadmap, defining priority uses of PIDs for researchers, research units, identifying which PIDs should be integrated first into the information systems, and setting the communication strategy. So the committee began to work last year and has delivered a roadmap just a few weeks ago. A central component of the strategy is the creation of a French register of research structures. We called it ERNEST, and this register will be aligned with the international role, and aims to provide like a common description and a unique identifier for our research units across French institutions. So it will act as a trusted sources to feed into role and support institution in extracting all the information they need. Working group have been established to address specific areas, including integration of the PIDs into information system, the use of data for research management and data circulation, and of course to support for organization changes. So the groups are working on action plans, identifying the priority in all the PIDs, particularly ORCID and the ROR. And they draft guidelines for completing the identifier records. Some of these groups are specially focused on technical and operational aspects, such as integrating the PIDs into the institutional systems, and ensuring the data flow for managing research units. So the key elements of the strategy include, of course, as I said, adoption of the international recognized PIDs, and France plans to rely the PIDs like ORCID and ROR, and integrating the ORCID into human resource information system and evaluation processes is for us a key priority. And we also consider connecting ORCID with national identifiers. So the integration of the PIDs into the information system is that's really a significant effort to ensure that university and research organizations incorporate PIDs in their internal management system. So human resources, but also financial, grants management, dashboarding system, databases for the structures and the researchers, that also priority. And of course, the goal is to link all the system to the PIDs registries through technical interfaces, and to enable automated data exchange and update. We are also working on a communication and change management plan. And of course, the success of the strategy depends on the engagement of the entire French research community. So targeted communications efforts are planned to inform both researchers, but also administrative staff, decision makers, all stakeholders who are involved in the projects. So the point of attention and success factors. Of course, a strong leadership support. And this support is from institutional and national leadership to reassure the DPOs, to encourage the establishment of robust data governance frameworks. So active involvement from the institution, so leadership, of course, but also IT departments, researchers, national research organization, and other actors is really essential to the project. As I said, another success factor is clear and targeted communications. It's important to clearly explain the why and the added values of PIDs to different audiences. So institutional leadership, of course, but department heads, the labs, the researchers, and so on. The data quality, of course, is important because to ensure that this high quality, we have to establish a clear governance rules for data sharing and use. And it's critical to make sure that different systems can communicate effectively through the use of PIDs. And last but not least, a clear and realistic roadmap with concrete use cases and well-defined milestones to guide implementation. So step by step, realistic steps, and we will just do it. So finally, France is drawing on international best practices and the benefits observed in countries that have already implemented PIDs adoption strategies, so the UK and Australia. And I want to thank the working group, this national working group of the RDA, because it was very useful for us to look at every use cases when we worked on our strategy. So thank you for that. And of course, we will fill the new template as soon as possible. So in summary, our strategy is around the PIDs, and we want to be it as a national, well-structured initiative. And the goals are to simplify the research management, to improve the data flow, and reduce the administrative burden by adopting ORCID and ROR. And the creation of our national register is so aligned with the ROR is a key step in organizing research information in France and to make it more compatible with the global research ecosystem. So for the international community too, this means better identification of French researchers and French research. So that's where we are right now, and I hope I can explain or tell more in October. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronique. I don't see any questions. I did have a few questions, but I think I might save them till the end because we make sure we've got time for discussion.
Yeah, it was maybe too long.
No, that's fine. I didn't mean that. But no, I just want to make sure that we do have time for discussions. But so I might come back to that. Don't see any hands up. But thank you very much. That's fascinating. Thanks for the reference to the working group outputs and the help there. That's great. So Josephina, I'll hand over to you now if you can share your slides. Brilliant. They look great, thanks. Hello, can't hear you, Josephine.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
No, I'm unmuted.
Right,
I was
over to
just
you.
thanking you for allowing us to present on our work so far on the national PID policy of Finland. Happy to be here. So these slides are provided or prepared together with my colleague Lassi Lager. And my name is Sofia Nordling, and we both work at CSC IT Center for Science in Finland. And we are a few of the key players in putting this national policy together. So I'm going to start with the work that we've done previously, and on top of which this current PID policy work is based upon. So we were able to publish a national roadmap for PIDs in the spring of 2023. which outlines, among other things, why Finland needs a national PID policy, and also why it needs a national PID working group that we now have established since about a year ago in Finland. But more importantly, the roadmap emphasizes the need of a national PID policy that covers, for example, some recommendations on how to use PIDs in different contexts and when managing different object types. So we are very, very mindful of this PID policy, that it should be a very useful one for also maybe the non-PID experts. So this we keep in mind when we put this PID policy together. Furthermore, also it should include a description of the different actors involved and what roles they have in the entire PID ecosystem. It should also provide clarity on how to apply PID minting practices during the entire data production process, rather than considering adding PIDs after all the data have been collected and produced and published already. So you can compare this maybe with the importance of having a data management plan in place prior to starting with the research work, for example. Furthermore, it's essential to comprehensively describe the different identifiers already in use, for example, DOIs, handle, and different URN name ranges, and their related management models and processes as well. But over to the PID working group, which has the main responsibility to create this national PID policy of sort. So as I mentioned, it started in early 2024. And so we now have a full PID, national PID working group, but we have done it in a way thinking about efficiency, that we have a smaller policy group that works on the PID policy. And then we consult the entire working group, and as well as the PID Forum Finland, which is a separate group of PID enthusiasts. So it's a more lightweight based group in the form of a network where everyone can join. So these two different groups are really crucial in preparing this policy. This work is mainly led by CSC IT Center for Science in close collaboration with the National Library of Finland. And this working group has members from the Research Council of Finland, research libraries, the GLAM organizations, Digital and Population Data Services Agency, and Technology Industries of Finland. And so, as you know, just by hearing about these different stakeholders or organizations involved in this work, the scope goes further than only including research. So also including the GLAM sector, and to a certain extent also public administration. And in total, we have representatives from 20 organizations involved in this working group. And I don't know if the GLAM as a term is familiar to everybody, but it's an acronym for galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. But it is crucial at this point to point out that we are yet to decide whether this outcome will be in the form of PID guidelines or a strategy. So we really need to have these discussions, as these can look somewhat different, and you also need a sort of a mandate from higher up for putting a strategy together. And hearing what Veronique just presented, I think that they have thought of, also the commitment from the different organizations and the different departments and different sectors, and they have a communication plan, and so they are very much more mature in their thinking. So we are maybe leaning towards more of our recommendations kind kind of an output at this point in time. We aim to have this policy published by the end of this year. So here are some of the topics that we envision this policy should cover. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, we are very keen on having something really useful, really concrete, really practical, serving as a guide also for those that are not maybe that familiar with PIDs from before. So mindful of having it like as an easy to read document coupled with some use case examples or these user stories put together in their correct context so that it makes it more understandable for a broader range of people. So of course, we want to open up the objective and scope, tell a little bit about why this policy is needed, how it is to be used, and the main benefits involved as well, of course, is important. We also want to make it clear what the requirements are on the legislation side. So for example, when it comes to GDPR and how the GDPR regulates the usage of PIDs. We will also include some guiding principles to help make the recommendations really clear. So separate ones for the different sectors we include and also for the different target groups, separate principles. Yeah, as I mentioned, we are now looking into adding as appendices these user stories that would further demonstrate the benefits and demonstrate some concrete use cases. Yeah, lastly, a terminology is needed in such a document where we explain all the terms. And lastly, we will also bring up some of the most frequently used PID systems and point to their related capabilities as well. So here is a list of some useful resources that we've made direct use of in our work. Along with some discussions that we've had around this work during recent times with other countries or networks that have been in similar situations. So for example, with SND in Sweden, ARDC in Australia, PID Network Deutschland in Germany, and World Data Systems as well. So this has been really useful for us. We have also been lucky to be able to work in European Open Science Cloud funded projects such as Fair Impact and FairCore for EOSC, where PID implementations and usage have been large parts of the project aims. We have also been a partner and a mentor in the support programs of the Fair Impact project. So we have just been able to make a lot of good connections from those projects. And to point to a concrete outcome coming out of the Fair Impact project is this practical PID guide for national initiatives. And as you might notice, it's based on the RDA National PID Strategies Guide and Checklist, but we just felt that it was really useful to make this very clear, actionable steps for national initiatives or national stakeholders to take in putting PID policy together. So this is part of a report featuring a series of infographics that all outline similar steps to take for improving their PID workflows organized across 2 additional levels, in addition to national initiatives, also service providers and institutions. And then I wanted to bring out some of the feedback from the collaboration we've done with the PID Forum Finland in the form of a workshop in February this year. So here we all agreed that the first versions should not aim at covering everything. Rather, we can expand it at a later point in time as things mature. We're also mindful of keeping this at a very concrete level, making use of other work already done. So there is no need to try to reinvent any wheels, rather learning from other countries and other networks as well, as many of you have pointed out already. It could be useful to bring front also what the capabilities set on systems are to be able to maintain the identifiers. For example, that the systems should be able to either maintain addresses or update resolving information. And lastly, also brought up earlier that the use cases might also help in generating interest and increase understanding of PID implementation. And lastly, this is our last slide. Some future plans of ours is to maybe try and expand and broaden the group to really make sure that all relevant players are included. We're going to clarify the goals and the timetable some more, and we're going to do some more workshops together with the PID Forum Finland because we get really useful input from there. And yeah, as I said, so by the end of this year, we aim to have published the first version of this policy. Yeah, that was everything from me. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Josephine. Can't see any specific questions in the chat, or no one's got their hands up. Yeah, good. You mentioned GLAM. It's good to see that getting mentioned. And user stories as well. So I would ask some questions, but in the interest of time, again, I think I'll move on to the next one, and just so we have plenty of time for discussion. And yeah, if you've got any questions, Josephine, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, over to you, Natasha. But thank you again, Josephine.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, can you see and hear it all okay?
Yep, all fine.
Good. Okay, thank you. So it's hard when you're giving an update to know exactly how much information people have heard earlier. So apologies if you've heard some of this before, and I hope that you'll hear some new things as well. So in Australia, some of our motivations for having a national PID strategy are very similar to what has been mentioned by Veronique in France and also the other countries that are represented today as well. So it is hard to get a complete view of research across the whole life cycle, to be able to track the impact of that research and to be able to find the research needed. Our government is particularly keen on the translation of research into industry outcomes, so that sort of bench to bedside process, basically. And the fact that there's a lot of double up duplication of data entry and things like that, that takes a lot of time and effort, and that we need to have insights into the data that we have. It has to be machine readable, has to be fair, which is of which, you know, PIDs are a key component. Within the Australian research and innovation environment, we have a very dynamic policy environment at the moment, and we're also about to have a federal election here, so there may or may not be a change in government, but all of these, there's been a revitalisation of our science priorities. The Universities Accord, which is about the translation of research into industry, is one of those factors, the need to reduce that administrative burden and so forth. And we know that the linking of PIDs helps to provide that evidence base that we need to drive innovation across the system, and that they're a core component of robust and trustworthy research infrastructure. And we have, so I'm the Director of National Coordination at the Australian Research Data Commons, and we are funded by the Australian federal government to build infrastructure that helps researchers get competitive advantage through data. We also have an Australian ORCID consortium that's led by our colleagues in the Australian Access Federation, who are also another infrastructure facility funded by our federal government. So similar to others, More Brains Cooperative, thank you very much, Josh and team, did a great job on looking at PID investment in Australia and what savings we could make by having a national approach. And here are the figures here, 38,000 person days per year, 24 million per year. And we then had a process where we consulted nationally for the period of a whole year, lots of open processes here for submissions, working groups. We had a task force at the senior level to help guide this, and we released our strategy in February 2024. So you can get that online and have a look at it. Since then, we've been working on our national collaborative roadmap, and you can see here the progress areas, and I've just marked, you know, what is a longer term goal for us, what's made significant progress, and what is our what are we ramping up and what has actually been completed. So you can see the core components there around strategic alignment and national capability, etc. I'll just let you read that one. But I just want to go through to where we're at now. So we have a 2025 National PID Action Plan. So that is the action plan for implementing the roadmap in this particular year. And there are 3 aspects to that. The first one is strategic alignment. And I was going to go through these in detail, but I think we're short on time. So let me just say, in terms of governance, we have a senior level strategic advisory group that is chaired by a Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research representing our Universities Australia Deputy Vice Chancellor Research Group. It has funders on there as representatives from the Research Office, from libraries, from other parts of the research ecosystem. And that group makes policy submissions. So we want to see PIDs represented in other policies that are coming out nationally, and they help to guide the roadmap. We are also undertaking a national benchmarking exercise. So if we want to go somewhere, we need to know where we are now in order to measure our success. And so the ARDC put out an expression of interest last year for partners to run the national benchmarking exercise. It is also the development of a framework where we can measure that benchmarking consistently year after year. And that was awarded to Digital Science. So Digital Science have been consulting with our strategic advisory group and with our stakeholder action groups to get input into the development of the framework and the benchmarking exercise. In terms of that number 2, we have 3 stakeholder action groups that we have been running for the past, since mid last year. We have one for research institutions. They are focused on the value proposition for them, developing a value proposition for them. So refining some of the More Brains work that's specific for institutions, as well as a capability maturity model that they can use. The research funders also have an action group, and they are focused on supporting their plans on the ARDC and the AAF supporting plans that they have for PID integrations. The Australian Research Council has had great success with ORCID and are building on that. Also, we have national PID focus activity areas, and we have a particular focus on PIDs for research projects. And we're just launching a group called the RAID Implementers Interest Group to facilitate that discussion as well. And sorry, I did mention the 3rd stakeholder action group, which is other NCRIS facilities similar to ARDC, basically a research infrastructures group, and they are focused on PIDs for facilities and instruments. And the 3rd part is the underpinning service delivery, which is having PID services available and used by the Australian research sector. And that includes the ARDC services and the AAFs. ARDC is the Data Site DOI Consortium lead, and we are also the Global RAID Registration Authority. And AAF leads the Australian ORCID Consortium. So between the 2 organisations providing that level of identifiers across the system. So let me just skip right through to the last slide I wanted to mention, and you can look at all this in detail when you if you would like to. So the last thing is people actually want to see case studies of PID usage as well. It is not, they want to see if I implement this at my institution, how is it of value to me and my researchers? How can I see this in action? So that wasn't the motivation behind the development of this particular product, ResearchLink Australia, but ResearchLink Australia does use a range of persistent identifiers, and the idea is to connect research and industry so that you can help with that research translation piece. So it uses all that data based on ORCIDs, DOIs, DataCite DOIs, Crossref DOIs, etc. And so it runs in tandem with the PID strategy. And you can have a look at ResearchLink there, but it has a lot of dashboards that are useful for people in getting an insight into the research across their institution and across the whole Australian research ecosystem. So I might just stop there because I also know we're short on time, and hand back to Chris.
Thanks, Natasha. I'm not going to, let me just share the screen actually. If anyone's got any questions for Natasha, again, I haven't seen any hand up. So, okay. So that's the next section. Well, there's two sections really on this. There's group discussion on focus on the rest of the year. But there's also that leads into the group discussion. So we've got 20 minutes now to talk about this. So, I'm actually going to stop sharing because I find it very hard to actually see what's going on in the chat. But what I have done, so that's the questions, give you time to have a look at that. But what I've also done, now I'm sharing, is I put it in the chat. And I see there's a, yes, we'll share those slides. I see there's a question from William. So so the group discussion is the focus area. So it's really over to you now on what we should focus on for the rest of the year, what challenges you're facing with regards to national PID strategies, and how the interest group can help you solve them. So please don't be shy. You can either put a comment in the chat or raise your hand or just unmute and chip in. While we're waiting for people to comment, yes, that the question there is for all presenters there. So Veronica, you've actually answered it, but if anyone wants to actually, any of the four presenters want to actually answer that question now, I'll wait for any input from people on the focus areas. The question was for all presenters. I have one question, if not already responded. Are the researchers currently using the PIDs, and are they okay with national action plan at all? I know that this is already a complexity for some people to have only an ORCID, so that's why the question is being asked. And Veronica's replied, many researchers have ORCIDs. The problem is updating their profiles and synchronizing them with raw affiliations. I don't know if anyone else wants to, unless he's answered, I think this is not even a national question only. We're happy if all the funders require ORCIDs and other PIDs, the applications for not all the research is granted through national research councils. So, yeah, I mean, you may have noticed that raw and ORCID were mentioned in the French presentation. And in the UK, we have the 5 priority PIDs, and then they're slightly different in Australia. And then there's the whole issue about whether they should be mandated or not. So Meryl, you've got your hand raised. Go down a rabbit hole, talk about mandating PIDs, but
oh, mandating PIDs. Yes, it is an interesting topic, but it's not more so about that. It's just in answer to the question that was asked with regards to ORCIDs and about researchers currently using PIDs. I still feel that it is not researchers that need to use PIDs. The benefit for PIDs, while it is there for researchers, it is mostly for the research organizations, for your funders, publishers, and everybody else that is contributing to the research. So rather than add the burden on a researcher to constantly use PIDs, what we should be doing is getting organizations to implement PIDs as part of their workflow and make it as easy as possible so that when researchers do have to use them, they don't have to think twice. It becomes quite ubiquitous, or it becomes just an everyday thing. You don't think twice about switching on the light button to get light on. You just press it and you expect it to be there. So it should be the same with PIDs, hopefully at some stage in the future. But that is where I see PIDs happening. And if that happens, then researchers would use PIDs. I don't see why they wouldn't use PIDs, because they don't have to do anything at all.
Thanks, Melroy. Anyone's got any comments on Melroy's comment there, or like I said, there are a number of challenges. Let's go back to what Natasha said about maturity levels. There's also the level of stalled, when strategies stall. Not going to make any other comment apart from that, because you need to have buy-in from funders, and you know, it comes down to getting that sort of high-level strategic support from your funders. So I realised, Hannah, I jumped in on this discussion. I thought you were actually down to lead that discussion. So apologies for chipping in and.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think Veronique has her hand raised. So.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Yes, please. We have other issues because so you asked how the group can help us in our reflection discussion. We are also facing other challenges. So we all agreed on the using ORCID, DOI, and so on. But we have other questions on to put PIDs on facilities, instruments, and of course grant projects. So we're thinking about using the rate identifier for the grant projects, but we have also questions from the researchers communities on how we can put PIDs on instruments and facilities. So to have a full science knowledge graph of the outputs of the research. So I don't know if Australia, for example, had already think about this or not.
We definitely have, and we have Siobhan just coming on here. She chairs the instruments, the PIDs for instruments in Australasia group, which is Australia, New Zealand, and I'll hand it to her.
Hey folks, thanks Natasha. Yes, for my sins, I am the head of the Australasian Instruments Identifiers group. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the PIDs group here. And I'm not sure if you were able to attend the session last night, but we talked, so I think the notes from that will be really helpful here. We had some great discussion about facility identifiers, but also instrument identifiers and what's appropriate to do there. And we do have some best practices that we've developed around instrument identifiers, which I'm really happy to share. They may be a little bit out of date now, they're 2 years old, but they do cover the use cases drawn from across different disciplines, but looking at using DOIs and PIDs. And how those interface with some of the other identifiers as well. And I'm one of the folks from the RAID team as well. So if you have any questions around that, feel free to throw them at me. And if I don't know the answer, I'll certainly find out for you.
I do. Thank you very much, because we are very interested in following this discussion and reflection, and not to do the same job and the same work in France. So thank you.
Yeah, please absolutely get in touch and we can talk more specifically, and very happy to share our experiences and particular use cases.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Just worth adding that, yeah, in Australia, it's about the research infrastructures being able to track the use of the instruments that they invest in. So they're funded by the government, they buy research instruments, and they want to see the usage of that in research outcomes. So, and the impact of their investment. So assigning PIDs to both the instrument and the facility is important there, and then how they are used down the track, whether for citation or through the web page or the metadata in the PID or whatever, to be able to track that. So probably similar to you, Veronique, in the way that you're thinking about it. But
we'll get in touch. Thank you so much.
Yes, I was in that PID session yesterday, and that's quite an eye-opener. That whole discussion about RAWs and PID. Yeah, I couldn't really get my head around it at the start, but I think I did in the end about facilities and different.
It was 1 in the morning for me, Chris. My brain's still going.
Harder for you, yeah. It wasn't that early for me, but yeah. Yes, that was fascinating. An interesting conversation. Well, so this group is trying to look at that sort of strategic level, but those sort of granular conversations are important. Not necessarily granular. I mean, they impact the policies and user stories, use cases. So it's all useful discussion. But it's how can the National PID Strategy Group help with any of this, and how can the work going on in different countries be looked at internationally, and or how does that international approach help with the PID strategies being developed, and get to that maturity level, because we have countries at different levels of a progression through that, developing a roadmap. And how can this interest group help with that collaboration, help with the lessons learned, and help countries that maybe just starting out, how we can support those rather than just collecting case studies from countries. How can we actually use this group as a sort of platform or discussion group, or however to make life easier for these different countries, or to support different countries, because there's been reference to different Ireland kindly mentioning UK and Australian strategies, and Veronique as well, and Finland. So those outputs have been used. So there's that whole discussion about what should be updated. We've given some ideas on a case study. What would be beneficial for other people. So Josephine, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so I was thinking whether we could sort of reflect on what makes a strategy and then compare it with, like, for example, just basic guidelines or recommendations or even a policy. So if one would be aiming for a national strategy, what would those major components be? And I was really inspired by Veronique's presentation, because she actually mentioned quite a few of those points in getting like everyone committed and having a plan for, she mentioned even for the IT department, what would be their role in all of this, like just to point to an example, and this communication plan would be crucial. But I would like to hear some other characteristics as well, especially since we are a little bit in a limbo in deciding into which direction we should go with our national PID policy.
Thank you. Well, we've got 6 minutes left.
Yeah, maybe I can. So this is not going to sort of react to what Josephine just said, but to add a perspective of a country that is in very early stages of developing a national PID strategy. For us, so I'm representing the National Library of Technology. We have funding to really speed up and support implementation of persistent identifiers in the Czech Republic. We are leading the ORCID consortium, DataCite consortium, and we are focusing on everything that evolves around persistent identifiers. But what we don't have is sort of a clear mandate to drive national PID strategy and to get people on board, or specifically the decision makers on board. So for us, it's very helpful to see how countries with more developed national PID strategies are engaging with the stakeholders, and how you are kind of gaining traction for a national PID strategy. Yeah, thanks.
Simabuku, you've asked the question here that some countries have their own research ideas for a variety of reasons, and Japan is one of the presenters today from such countries. And if yes, how have you come to an agreement to adopt or crosswalk with ORCID? I'm going to open that up to anyone here that can answer that question. I mean, we had previous presentations from Latin America. Obviously, the time zone isn't great for doing that for this session, but can't think of any off the top of my head.
Sorry, we did have our own researcher identifier in Australia in the past. It was run through our National Library. However, having something that is global was really important, because research doesn't stop at Australian borders, and having something that is widely used outside of Australia. And we developed that back in 2010, and ORCID came around in 2011. So it was before ORCID, and we made that shift to ORCID once ORCID came in, and we did that as a whole community. So we had a consultation process within Australia where we looked at the common problem of needing to identify researchers accurately and link them to their works. And that is how the Australian ORCID consortium model came about, and is broadly used across the Australian research sector. We have almost all of our universities that are members and users of that consortium. So we made that shift. But I think that probably doesn't help you, Nobuko, because we don't have that addition of a language barrier in there as well, or challenge rather, and perhaps there's some other factors unique to Japan. So
thanks, Natasha. Yes, there are some particular challenges, because if there are any ID system in work, there are people who are already working on it, and some funding goes into that system. So changing that structure is pretty difficult to get some buy-in from the current stakeholders. So that's where I think the politics and the difficulties lie.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Rory, over to you. You had your hand up first.
Yes, thanks for that. It's just to Nobuko's question, and it's more or less to what Natasha said. But one of the things that I would think about is, if you're looking at a persistent identifier for researchers, rather than name a particular persistent identifier, you want to look at which persistent identifier for researchers actually fit certain requirements. So as long as it's global, it's interoperable with other persistent identifiers in the sector, you can still use it. That is what you want to go. It may be ORCID, it might be something else you have, which is just which does the same sort of work and is interoperable with other persistent identifiers that are being used in the sector. But you don't have to. It's effectively, as long as it does the function of a persistent identifier. So yeah, if there is something that fits the bill, then that I don't see an issue with it, because as long as it's interoperable with everything and it allows you to understand what's happening with your research, not just nationally, but also on a global scale.
Thanks, Roy. I'm going to move quickly on to Michelle, because we've got 1 minute left. So over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, I've very typically waited until the very last minute to put my hand up. So I wonder, would it be possible to kind of broad strokes categorize the kinds of solutions that are coming out of the strategies and roadmaps. So like the Irish example is looking at a national centralized infrastructure. The Finnish example was certainly more practical in terms of a step-by-step guide and policy-based. So I think it would be useful to understand, as I said, just the kinds of solutions that other countries are implementing, and if categories of those are at all possible or useful, of course, to other people in the room.
Sounds like a great idea. Sorry, just as the conversation gets going, we're out of time, so I know I'm not supposed to overrun on these. So I thank you to all the presenters again, and thank you for everyone for coming along. As I mentioned, this is an interest group that's sort of run by its members, with just the co-chairs to sort of coordinate everything. So please, if you have any ideas or suggestions or focus areas, please, it doesn't end with this session. It's an ongoing conversation. So please get in touch and keep the conversation going. So thank you to everyone who's contributed, and again for the presenters and co-chairs. So enjoy the rest of the RDA plenary and see you all again soon.